with some perplexity at these issues in Europe, and some dismay as we saw anti-Semitism revive in Europe. Now, I don't for a moment think that it is absent in the US, but I have to say the much more, in a sense, the greater mobility, the much higher degree of in some ways, integration that characterizes the United States, the extraordinary ability, as we've just seen in the last presidential election, even by a member of what was so long a totally disadvantaged group in America, for a black man to be president, I think shows just some of the issues of social openness, which have perhaps contained this problem in the US in a way that, frankly, we've been much less successful in doing in Europe. And I think that is a cause for us all to reflect on, both with sadness, but with an absolute commitment and determination to solve the issue. And I think this conference is much more timely than probably John and I had any expectation it would be when we first invited people, and that's because of the dramatic rise in anti-Semitic incidents that have occurred here in the UK and elsewhere in Europe following the fighting, the Israeli campaign in Gaza. We saw during that period the greatest increase. We had some 250 incidents reported, many of them not serious, but some significantly serious, including attacks on Jewish synagogues, communities and organizations. And of course, that does remind us of the fact that, in a sense, everybody on all sides of this argument seems to have huge difficulty in separating Israel, the state, and its political agenda from the broader issue of Jews living here or elsewhere. And it is that merger of the two, that sort of symbiotic relationship, which has, in a sense, keeps on flaring up the embers of what one would otherwise hope would have been a cold and dead piece of history of which we could all be ashamed, but from which we would move on. Now, we have tried here in this country to really tackle this thing at its roots, and we've taken a number of measures. I commend the excellent report of the all-party parliamentary inquiry to anti-Semitism, which was commissioned by John and published in 2006. And out of that came measures which include honoring the victims of the Holocaust, including through a Holocaust Memorial Day, supporting the International Task Force for Education, Remembrance and Research to help educate young people around the world about the destructiveness of hate, working through our embassies worldwide to support overseas parliamentary colleagues, including many of you here, in your work to tackle anti-Semitism in your home countries, supporting the commendable work of the EU, the OSCE and the Council of Europe, including support for the personal representative of the OSCE chairman in office on combating anti-terrorism. Now, I hope, and I'm sure already, that this conference is not just giving you all a chance to share your valuable experiences, but also on how, particularly in the light of this recent uptick in incidents, that I hope it will give us all a sense of urgency about agreeing on what further concrete ideas we need to find to work together on the next steps within our national context. But in the spirit that we saw in our own inquiry here, and the London Declaration, which we hope you will all sign up to, is set to work out what this means in practice. Now, I think something which is very much in the minds of many of you today is this issue of the Durban Review Conference, which is an early, if you like, challenge to how we make the right policies work in practice. I understand last night Mr. Frattini indicated that Italy was thinking, was very close to withdrawing from the preparatory process. We also have come very close at different stages of it. But, and let me just say this, we're not there yet, and we sought to coordinate very closely with the new administration in Washington, and the US indicated yesterday that it was going to engage in the Durban process, and we will work with the US to try and make sure that we get a good outcome. But we are extremely clear, if we cannot get a fair and balanced outcome, we will withdraw. I myself was at the first Durban conference. I have never seen such a disgraceful event in quite a long international life and quite a few international conferences. Just one biographical note, I happen to be half South African and know that the biggest fighters for freedom and the end of apartheid and for human rights and civil liberties in South Africa were the Jewish community who came from Eastern Europe in the 30s. And to see these young people, the children of those who'd been the lawyers, been the trade union activists, been the leaders in the Communist Party of South Africa and who'd won those freedoms, to see their children and grandchildren come enthusiastically to this conference because they believed in the fight against racism and they believed that the world owed a debt to Africa because of slavery. And to see their idealism thrown back in their face through these violent anti-Semitic attacks in that conference was for me a low point of international affairs, and one that I certainly won't be party to again. So while we will fight to get a good resolution and fight to make sure that reason and decency prevails at the conference, we are very much there at the moment, if you like, on a sort of last warning, that if we can't prevail, we're not going to stay and see a conference whose outcome we can't accept. Now, let me just close by saying that I think, we are in London, and somehow it's perhaps appropriate, therefore, to quote one of our greatest British writers, George Orwell, who noted of anti-Semitism that there is, quote, some psychological vitamin lacking in modern civilization, and as a result we're all more or less subject to the lunacy of believing that whole races or nations are mysteriously evil. In tackling anti-Semitism, there are without doubt some remaining social, cultural and psychological tablets that we still have to follow, because more than 60 years after Orwell's diagnosis, we've got to acknowledge, if we're truly to tackle anti-Semitism, that the politics of the Middle East has sadly once again breathed life into this old beast. And so our task is a fundamentally political one. We've got to ensure, and in this room I'm sure you could find totally different views of Israel's foreign policy, and the point really is that we've got to look at these as utterly separate issues. Israel has, as a nation state, an absolute right to do what it believes is its best strategy of self-defense, and it's an absolute right of others to tell them that we think it's not the right strategy and that there is a much better way to secure peace with its neighbors. But that's the debate between states, which is a perfectly legitimate one for us to have, and we have it with dozens of other states every day of the year. And we've got to separate that debate about politics and national interests from this much more insidious and deeper and utterly unacceptable cultural ill that still infects our societies. And I welcome your discussions here, and we look forward to working with you to implement the recommendations and pledges today, although in doing so, saying as I began, wishing that this conference was utterly unnecessary, and only sad that it isn't. Thank you.